Hello, and welcome to the 12th of our Growing Care Farming monthly themed webinars. And if you're interested in looking back over the other 11, then they can be found on our Growing Care Farming YouTube channel. This webinar is going to tell us more about the range of work that can take place on care farms with young people, and also how we've teamed up with Leaf Education and other partners to make care farming more visible through the Countryside Classroom website. So just a couple of housekeeping points before we start. The webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Social Farms and Gardens website in due course, so you can go back and revisit anything that you feel you've missed. Your details and attendance are private and won't be shared. Attendees are not visible via the video link and everybody is automatically muted. If you've got any questions, use the Q&A function in the menu. You can type your question in and one of the team will pick it up and ask it on your behalf at the end. And any links in the presentation can also be posted into the chat function. So you can click on those as we go through and view the information during the webinar. So at the moment, you should be able to see three faces on the screen. I'm Deborah Evans, the Regional Care Farming Manager for Growing Care Farming. We've also got Dr. Rachel Bragg, the Care Farming Development Manager, and she's going to tell us a bit about Countryside Classroom. But I'm also really delighted to introduce Rob Gayler, CEO of Lambourne End in Essex. And Rob's going to talk about how Lambourne End works with young people and some of the different programmes that they run and why they do it that way as well. So as I said, there'll be no doubt lots of questions that spring into mind during the webinar. So please feel free to post any questions as they occur to you, and we'll pick them up with Rob and Rachel as they finish the presentations. And there's an option to post them either publicly or privately. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rachel to tell us a bit more about Countryside Classroom.
Thank you, Debbie. Okay, so as you know, every month we try and focus on a different aspect of care farming. So we've in the past we've done mental health, measuring outcomes, all sorts of things. And over June, the month of June, we've been focusing on care farming for education. So as part of this, we've not only launched a new care farming for education film that you can find on the care farming web pages. I'll post the links when I finish talking into the chat so you can find them there. And this film has been designed to highlight how care farming can benefit young people. And we've also launched, as Debbie said, the Care Farming Hub on the Countryside Classroom, which is a really exciting way to make care farming and green care sort of more visible to education referrers and teachers. And this is what I'm going to talk to you about briefly before we hear about care farming for young people in practice from Rob. Next slide, please, Debbie. So for those of you who are new to Countryside Classroom is a one-stop shop to help teachers find resources, places to visit, and school support relating to food, farming, and the natural environment. And it's a partnership of organisations who are all committed to ensuring that all children have the opportunity to learn about and experience food, farming, and the natural environment. So some of the partners in Countryside Classroom include Leaf Education, the Country Trust, Social Farms and Gardens, Learning Through Landscapes, Council for Learning Outside the Classroom, Natural England, AHDB, CLA, and the National Trust. And that's to name but a few. Next slide, please, Debbie. So that's Countryside Classroom, sort of the main page, which has been around for years. But the Care Farming for Green Care Hub for Countryside Classroom was really the logical next step to support care farming for education. And through our Growing Care Farming funding, it enabled us to make this happen. So we really hope that the Countryside Classroom resources will help education professionals really understand the massively positive impact that care farming can have on young people and on their education. And we want it to help to raise awareness of what care farms can deliver to mainstream schools. And you know, obviously care farming is one of a range of interventions that can help young people in education. So that's what it is. What's on it? Next slide, please, Debbie. We've got a few animations here, so I'm going to be saying next slide quite often. So we've got another new, on this site, on the hub page, we've got another new film, and this one was aimed specifically at education professionals, explaining how care farming works in educational settings. Next one, please. Then there are also all sorts of explanation of the benefits of alternative provision on care farms, just showing in some of the screen grabs here. The other thing that's really exciting is the next one, please, Debbie, searchable map of care farms and green care sites. So this map, you can, if I was a teacher or somebody wanting to refer somebody to a care farm, I could click on the map or search by postcode, and I'll be able to see which care farms are in my area. And so you can register on the website to feature on this map. Next one, please, Debbie. And so you just click the register button, which is at towards the bottom of the main web page on the Care Farming Hub. Next one, please. Then part of that, you get your own blurb about the farm. You have to, when you register, you fill in all sorts of different details about the farm, what you do, who you work with, age ranges, whether you do qualifications or not, all sorts of things, and you'll get your own blurb, and you can put your photo in there as well. Next one, Debbie, is just what else is on there? Yes, so if for care farms that are already on Countryside Classroom, you can be on both maps. So you just register your site again and click the care farming and green care box, and you will then appear on both maps. And then next one, the other bit that's on the web page is we've got a series of case studies about care farming for young people. There will shortly be one of featuring Lambourne End on there as well. It's just not up yet. So registration for care farms is ongoing. So if you are a care farmer working with young people, please register your farm or your green care site on the website and let us know what you think. And that is, I think that's me done, Debbie.
It is, yes, brilliant. That
Thank
was a
you.
whistle-stop tour. Thanks, Rachel, fantastic. I'm now going to hand over to Rob, which I'm really looking forward to hearing about that. I've been fortunate enough to be able to visit Lambourne End, but it's going back quite a long time ago now. And hopefully post-COVID at some point I'll be able to visit again, but I am really looking forward to hearing from you, Rob. So over to you.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm going to try and talk to you about care farming and alternative education. And obviously I will talk about Lambourne End quite a bit because that's what I know best. Although I have also worked at other city farms where we have been involved in that over the years as well. And I think the first thing to say with that is that whether it's a city farm, we actually call Lambourne End a centre for outdoor learning. So we probably do more activity. We wouldn't just call ourselves a care farm. We do many activities, but we do take part. We have many programs that are care farming activities. So for me, it's very much it's the care farming that we are taking part in, and then we have other things that go on in the same way that city farms and community gardens might have other activities going on that wouldn't be considered care farming, but they all, or the majority of them, do all take part in care farming sort of structured activities to benefit people. And obviously, I'm talking to you about education and alternative education. Now, we use the term alternative education because that's an education term and it makes sense to people in educational establishments. However, I'm very much an advocate of calling it complementary education. So we're not trying to do something completely different to schools. We're trying to work with schools and with the young people to support them to stay in school the rest of the time they're not with us. You know, for many people, I'm sure I'm preaching to the converted young people. There's a large number of young people that don't cope well in class of 30 in one room all the time, and that just is too much for them. We have young people that come to us and that have got a history of, and it says they get in trouble a lot at school and that sort of thing. And yet when they come to us, that they're really good, and you say, well, what's the difference? And they say, well, at school, the only time I get to run around is break and lunchtime. When I'm here, the only time I get to sit down is break and lunchtime. And it's just that different feel, and that's what makes it work for the young people, as many other things too, but that's one of the key sort of things I think makes a difference to people. And I think the other thing to say is our provision has evolved over many years through a number of different reasons. I think when I first started in this sort of 25, maybe 30 years ago, there was a sort of AP happening, a sort of alternative provision, but it was very much schools. Oh, we've got a difficult young person here. We don't really know what to do with them. Oh, we could get them a place at this city, at this local city farm. And once they got out there, they were forgotten about. And my first slide there just shows, you know, it was actually really good still for the young people. They benefited greatly. They came up and they just got stuck in with jobs on the farm, helping out, and they learnt. And as far as schools were concerned, they were happy because those young people were out of the way and not causing a problem in school. So everyone was happy, and we had some young people on the farms that helped out and made a difference to us, and we could see them progress as well. But sort of 15 years ago or so it is now, Ofsted sort of picked up on this and started putting greater pressure on schools to have greater ownership of putting students out on AP. And so if you've ever been involved in it, you might know we went through a phase where if we had any students on AP from a school and that school was getting had an Ofsted inspection, they would come and visit us. So we went for, you know, over a sort of month period, we might have had 5 or 6 Ofsted inspectors come in because they were inspecting different local schools, and Ofsted were picking up on how the schools were working with the AP providers. And so that very much led to they weren't actually, that they knew what we did work, so they weren't actually analysing what we did, and obviously there was an overview of that, but what they were really interested in is how the school were in touch with us to know how the young person was benefiting and how we fed back to the schools. So there became a lot more structure on it. And so we've had those Ofsted requirements. Then there was a requirement for schools to be getting people through qualifications, and then those qualifications needed to be on the qualifications framework. And then Progress 5 came in, and we thought, oh dear, if schools are going to want people to get 5 GCSE A to C, then they're not going to want to send people to us anymore, which might have been the case, but actually what we found was more schools decided to send people to us because heads of schools that had a bit of vision and said, there is no point in me sitting down people to try and get them 5 GCSEs that aren't capable of doing it. We will just forget about the points that the school are going to get. We need to do what's right for the young person. And actually our provision increased then rather than decreased. And then obviously Progress 8 was a bit more an extension of that. And one of the things we found most recently is changes in vocational qualifications. So there were some really good vocational qualifications. In my opinion, and this is a personal opinion now, that there seems to be a concern that the vocational qualifications weren't academic enough. And so they have removed a lot of the practical aspects of animal care. And it isn't just in animal care. We work with other AP providers that do motor mechanics, etc. And I know that allowed them to start that. One provider just stopped because people could get a motor mechanics qualification without lifting the bonnet of a car. And now with animals, people could be teaching animal care in schools without access to animals. So as an employer, that concerns me, because now if someone has a level 2 animal care qualification, they might not know whether they're allergic to guinea pigs or scared of horses, even. So I think that there's issues there. But all those background things have meant that over the years our provision has changed. I think that's any of you involved in this sort of thing will know you have to be flexible. We write bespoke programs to fit the needs of the schools, and so we have to change, and they have different pressures put upon them, so we are constantly having to change. So we have gone from individuals just being sent out and almost left to their own devices, to then trying to get schools getting structured groups out to send them to work towards a level 2 qualification that would either be a BTEC or a City and Guilds qualification. And then we went through schools not being able to afford to send whole groups and needing to get people through the Progress 5 and Progress 8. So we then drop back to having individuals come that had a higher threshold of need. And when I'm talking thresholds of need, it might be for mental health, it might be for behaviour, it might be for low achievement, it could be for a whole variety of reasons, but schools realise they're not working in school well in school. So we now work with a whole variety of schools across 4 or 5 different London boroughs and Essex that send people out to us. But then what happened, we also saw a decline in the need because we were having people that had a higher and higher threshold. The decline for a need for them to have a formal education died off as well, because I think there was an acceptance that actually most important thing for those people was social integration, health and well-being, and personal development. So we found that that's died off a little bit as well. There are still some schools that want it, and then as that's died, but we've still been able to offer qualifications. We have had now recently, over the last 2 or 3 years, a number of schools returning that want to bring groups. So either mainstream secondary schools that would like to bring, that want to bring groups of people, young people that aren't coping in school, to special needs schools, autistic schools, that all want to bring people out for 1 day a week to work on a work experience based or working towards qualifications. So that meant all these changes over the years are meant for quite a variety of programs. And so to try and explain the programs we've put together, I'm just going to run through some of the programs we run and the structures that we put to them, to show how we try to cater in different ways from different people. So our most established program has been our hands-on animal care, and we actually run this in partnership with Wellgate Community Farm, which is another local city farm, and that allows us to have more students. They get to experience different size farms. We're 54 acres, Wellgate's 1.5 acres, but Wellgate have animals that are much more used to being around people. We have greater space, so the different sites work for different people in different ways. It allows us to split students up if we need to, and it allows us to work together. But for the young people, most of the young people on that are aged 14 to 18, and they are working towards an animal care qualification, a land-based level 1 or level 2 city and guilds, and they can specialise into, as they move on into animal care. You can offer different awards. There's different levels of award. There's an award, a certificate, an extended certificate, or a diploma. We normally start them just with a certificate, which is just getting them through 3 units in the time we have them for. And then if they're doing well, if they want to stay for other years, we can increase the number of units they do to a certificate or an extended certificate. But of course, you still end up with people that haven't quite reached 14 but have got a real interest in animals, or aren't quite capable of doing a qualification, and so we still have people that attend those programs that aren't working towards a qualification, but the aim of that is that it is working towards a formal qualification. A few years ago, another ongoing project is our Food for Thought project, which I think we've got a few photos of. And we set that up a few years ago, initially with lottery funding, and this was aimed at people an even more nurturing program for people that wanted just some social interaction, to be outside, doing something meaningful, but in an outdoor environment, social integration, but taking part in something meaningful and feeling valued. And so we have the people on that either suffer quite significantly, not from mental health issues like depression, self-harming, fairly anxiety, and also people with disabilities. Now, it's not necessarily aimed at people with high thresholds, but as I'm sure a lot of you are aware, that the funding follows the people that have a higher threshold of disability or fairly high health needs, which is why we have a staffing ratio of 1 to 3 people, but quite often some of those people need to come with additional support workers. So the main process of this is to get people involved in growing. We don't worry too much about what's grown. It is nice to be able to have produce to sell and to be able to make Christmas hampers and make jams and chutneys, but it's the importance of growing things together that's the key theme of this, and the social interaction for the young people. And of course it goes wider than that, because they have the social interaction within the group they work on in the gardens, but as today we've got all sorts of different groups coming onto site, so they also have the social interaction with the rest of the Lambourne End Centre community. But that has proved massively successful. We're seeing more and more people want to come on that, and at the moment we have about 9 people a day, so 3 members of staff, but we're looking like needing to increase that to another member of staff, and getting up to 12 young people a day. Some of those are working towards qualifications, but when they feel ready to. So as an example, we had a young lad that started on this early on in the stage, and he left school. He had reasonably significant autism, and that had meant he'd spent pretty much 2 years in his room and not come out. So he came out to start off with, spent half hour in the car with his mum, and then went away again, and he did that for a week or for a few weeks, and then he came and got out and had a walk round, and then got back in the car, built it up to sort of half a day a week, and then to 2 half days, and then to 2 full days, and then he was getting himself home on the train. And then he asked us when he was ready, he said, I'd like to have a go at doing the qualification, and we got him through the qualification. And then after doing the qualification, he started volunteering to come back and help other people on the programme, and now he's out and looking for work. So that is a fantastic story, but that took 7 years, that process, because we did it at his pace, at a pace that suited him when he was ready for it, and we weren't pushing him through it. And I think that's quite an important thing for us to bear in mind. Those are 2 of our key programs. And Food for Thought isn't aimed at a particular age group. It tends to pick up sort of 16 through to 25-year-olds, helping people, especially people with disabilities, through that transition from being at school or college and into adulthood. It becomes much harder to get funding for people within adult care, and that's something that I guess will slowly progress, because as the people that have been with us want to stay with us and they move to adult services, I think there's going to be pressure on adult services for them to actually support people still to come to Lambourne End. Okay, but we've also, if we move on, Debbie, we've also had calls from primary schools. Now this may for young people with things like ADHD, autism, Asperger's, and that just being in a classroom, as I said, 5 days a week is too much. So they come out for 2 days a week. We do it on a Tuesday and a Friday at the moment, so it breaks the week up for the young people in school. And they do all sorts of things, from grooming the horses to having their own plot of land to grow things on, to collecting up the eggs and putting them in boxes, to pond dipping, and they learn through doing. And they probably don't even realise they're learning, but they learn an awful lot whilst having the freedom to do things and run around and be outdoors. And that again is a very successful programme. And that is just aimed at primary school. There's no onus on us to get them through any sort of qualification. We are just supporting them to stay in school the rest of the time and trying to help them with some of the soft skills, developing some of the skills that they need to move on and stay in school, and hopefully make a transition to secondary school as well when they leave. And I think if we move on again, I think I'm pretty sure I've got our focus program up next. So I brought the focus that left us with a gap between our rural studies programs and our qualifications, where we were looking to get people through animal care and horticulture, where people could work through qualifications. So our sort of key stage 3, where actually people have gone up to secondary school, they're not achieving or they're not engaging fully for whatever reason, but we want to try and get them ready to start on their GCSE years. So we set up a focus program, which was very much using everything available to us, and the focus is on the soft skills for the young person. So these 3 pictures are an example. So we might do some days where we're working on how young people communicate, and understanding communication. But we would do that. I haven't got a picture of blindfolded archery, but we'd get them involved in archery, and then we'd get them doing blindfolded archery. So the person giving the instructions without touching the person has to give really good verbal instructions to the person shooting the arrows. We might then go on to do our goat show, where the young people get given a goat, they have to groom it and get it, and then they have to take it for a walk, and then they have to show that goat as you would in an animal show. So they have to learn to communicate with their goat. Now, it doesn't matter how much you shout at a goat and how much you swear at a goat. All that happens is the goat gets more and more excited. So you have to find ways to be assertive, to work with that goat, to get it to do what you want to do. Another important form of communication. And then we're very lucky to have other resources on site, like an artificial caving system. And when you go caving, communication is everything. So you have to look after the person behind you. If all the lights go out, and we have to really work with each other to get everyone through the system and out the other end and support people. So that's just an example how we try to put things together. And people might wonder, how can you have climbing and kayaking and caving in the same place that you've got gardening and environmental activities and farming? But those are how we put those activities together to try and benefit the individual and help with communication. It might be trust if we're climbing, or taking them to see the bull in the field. So there's different ways and different themes we can work on, and that's our sort of key stage 3 programs, trying to get people re-engaged, to get them back into their ready for their GCSEs. So those are all programs that we offer, that we've put together in response to needs, and those can be booked. Most of those are booked by schools that have individuals they'd like to send to us, but we have also now got schools that are booking maybe 5 or 6 people onto those to come on a day, and sending a teacher to support them. So it's a bit of a mixture on all of those, how those people attend. Something that's slightly different is our transition program, which we do have. One of our boroughs, the London Borough of Havering, have really got their AP together. So they have an AP coordinator who coordinates all the AP providers are approved by them. They have AP meetings every half term that all the other AP providers attend, and all the staff from schools that are responsible for sending people to AP. They have an AP platform, so that when people put people onto the platform, onto a course, they go on the platform. So all our registers are done via that platform, so the schools can just look at that platform to see when those people are in, and it takes out a lot of emails and phone calls to say, oh, so and so's in today, etc. So that's a really good example of how that works. But from that working, I think it's about 4 years ago now, it might even be 5, when Havering closed down their primary PRU, they then realised they had nowhere for these young people to go. And don't get me wrong, it probably was the right thing to close it down, because it was almost a small prison within another school where those youngsters went in. They weren't allowed out into the playground because it could disrupt the other students in the school. They came in doors locked, and if they kicked off, they were shut in a room to throw chairs around, and that was it. So what we now have is we have been commissioned by Havering to run a program in partnership with another AP provider that does that works on English, maths and science. So they have the students for half a day on our site. They rent a room on our site and teach them on site, and we have them for the other half a day when we're working on their soft skills. So whether we're feeding lambs, building shelters, abseiling, we do the whole mixture of activities, work duties around site activities, but we are then trying to build their confidence, their self-esteem, definitely their resilience, how they'll build relationships. And quite often, a lot of these young people will be going through their EHCP plan or process during this stage, which allegedly should take up to 22 weeks. My experience, it can take a lot longer. And if these students have just been expelled from or excluded from school and at home for 22 weeks, imagine how difficult that is for those young people to make it back into school after that. So now we have them whilst they go through that process. Once the new school's identified, it might be a new school, it might be a special needs school, or a more appropriate school. It might be they go back into the same school, but once they've got their HCP plan, they've actually got support within the school to cope. So our job is to prepare them for whatever they go on to next. So we have 2 transition groups that visit the site. We work with them in the morning or the afternoon, and Future Gateways do the other half of that. Hence that is a commission program by the local authority. So that's slightly different. But it's come purely from building that relationship, and then them coming to us and saying, oh, we've got this problem with these students now, can you help? Talked about it, and that we've put together, and that's again developed over the years. I can't remember if they had any nice pictures. I think it was just what I was going to say before closing was that all these programs we have designed in conjunction with the schools. Obviously, the programs where there are qualifications to be sought, there's outcomes and there's measurable outcomes. We were under pressure, especially even with rural studies and the transition program. People were sending them to us because they're not coping in school, and then they were asking us to provide feedback and monitor them by their academic attainment. And we said, no, that doesn't work. You're sending them to us because they're not doing those, they're not coping with those things. You're asking us to work on their personal and social development and their health and well-being. Therefore, that's what we're going to monitor, and we'll feed back to you how they're doing on those things. So in order to do that, we have developed a number of tools, and I know this has been the subject of other webinars, but we have created things for ourselves, because what we found is that everything is individually led. For some people, it could be coping with trauma. So we've had students that have seen their dad murdered, and trying to get them to come out of that, put down their hoods, smile, talk to people. Those are all massive steps. We've had people that it's their health, so actually managing to stand on one foot and balance on one foot so they can use a fork properly. That's just so different. And some of the things are quite difficult to capture. My lovely example of that is we had someone, a group of students picking raspberries in the fruit cages, and they were, as they do normally, picking a raspberry. One went in the pot, pick another raspberry, one went in the mouth, and so on. And it happened to be towards the end of the day, and Mum turned up to pick this particular student up and just burst into tears. Well, her autistic son only ever ate chicken nuggets, chips, or pizza, would never eat in front of anyone, wouldn't eat fruit, wouldn't eat vegetables. And there he was. And it was such a small thing, but we wouldn't even known about that as being, so this measuring that sort of thing is really, really difficult. But we've got 2 tools that we use at the moment. One is a mapped tool, which is measuring activity and participation, which scores things on a sort of 1 to 4 level on how well people take part, and how much guidance and how much help they need to achieve those things. And we've also got a personal development and monitoring tool, which again works on the same basis, scoring things. But what we do is we've got a set of 12 objectives, and for each objective we choose 3 outcomes, but we only choose 3 objectives at a time for a person. So initially, when they first come to us, the first objective might be to feel welcome, safe, and valued. So measurements of that might be that they smile, that they talk to people, that they take their hoods down, and then the next stage up is building relationships, and there might be talking to other people and those sorts of things. So we can set different outcomes for different objectives, and we choose different objectives for different people. So it's all done by goal setting, and that then allows us to get a picture of how those young people are doing, for us then to provide progress reports back to schools, and that's what we do. So quite often we're saying to schools, these young people are doing really well in this environment, where they've got a high staffing ratio. That doesn't necessarily mean that if they streak back straight into school, they cope with it no problem. But But ultimately, I think these activities, all the stuff that I've talked about in terms of designing the program, the registering, the outcomes, the monitoring, those they're more than tick box exercises. We do them properly, but they're tick box exercises for the referral organisations in order to justify sending those students to us. And there's a danger then that it puts a pressure on staff to think, oh, we've got to get these young people through this qualification in this time. You know, the example I used earlier that took 7 years, if we'd pushed that through and said, all right, you're with us, you've got 4 weeks to settle in, then you're going to work towards a Sitting Guilds certificate, and then you're going to go for the extended certificate, and by 2 years' time, you'll have this, this, and this. That would have been far too much. That would have been overload, and we'd have lost them from the start. So I think there's a real balance for us. We do need to be answerable to schools. We need to be able to give them feedback, and we need to be able to monitor that. But we need to be sensible in the goals that we set for people, and not push ourselves too far to try and do too much too quickly. Because ultimately what we need to remember, and it can be really, really difficult in the hustle and bustle of everything, and if like me, I'm lucky enough to live on site, but then you start to take things for granted, but just giving people time to be. You know, just to be out in the outdoors, enjoy walking through a field of buttercups or sitting amongst the poppies, just gives people time. And I think too often we don't take time to realise how important that is to people. It's just a place and for people's health and well-being, which is ultimately what we're trying to improve. That's the starting point, and then through personal development and encouraging people to improve their self-esteem, their resilience and their aspirations, then we have we take it from there. But a starting point is just giving people that space, and I think we need to hold on to that as well, rather than panic too much about, oh, we've got to do this school wants this done, this school wants this done. And I was certainly like that early on, but we've got much more into, well, this is what we feel is appropriate for this young person, so this is what we suggest to them. And what we found is the more we do that, the schools actually buy into that, because rather than saying we've got to get them through a BTEC diploma, actually at level 2, actually let's start with a level 1 certificate, get them through it, and then they can succeed, and then we can move them on to other things. And I think probably ultimately people just, that the main thing that people want when they come to us is to feel safe. They want to feel welcome, they want to feel involved in something, they want to feel valued, they want to feel of use and be involved and feel part of our community. And that's the important things that we offer. And so at that point, I think I've probably talked enough. I'd like to hand over to anyone that might like to ask questions.
Brilliant. Rob, there was just so much in that. It's just amazing. Thank you so much. I think there'd be a lot of people listening who really sort of connect with that, and it's just been really good to hear, you know, have the opportunity to hear you talk about all that in a sort of a block, I guess, isn't it, Rachel? Because we're sort of aware of what you do, and we've had sort of snippets over the years, but to hear it put together like that has just been really, really interesting. We are going to move on to questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen actually, because it's just making us all absolutely tiny. Rachel, do you want to pick up on anything before we sort of throw it wider?
Yes, and actually, you say, do I want to pick up on anything? It's already been picked up on 2 of the questions in the chat, in the Q&A already, and I'll talk through that in a minute.
Right.
One of the things, Rob, that we've had a lot of questions in over the last few months was about Ofsted spot checks, Ofsted inspections under caution, people being interviewed under caution, and this whole worry about care farms delivering alternative provision, operating as an illegal school. So we've had all sorts of feedback from care farmers, both on the webinar now, and also we've had feedback and emails. While we've got you, can we ask you whether you've had any experience with this, what you decided to do at Lambourne End? And yes, so over to you for that one. You know, what are the rules?
I can tell you the rules as I understand them, but I can sympathise with people because I have been in that very spot. We used to work to the fact that you couldn't have them for more than 18 hours a week. So we originally said we couldn't have them for more than 3 days. However, there is actually another clause that says you can't have them for more than 50% of their education. So we work with students that are on roll somewhere. So even if they've been excluded from school, they should still have they're still responsible until they've been handed over to another school. They're still responsibility of that school. If not, quite often the local authority will take over. They've got a lot of virtual schools now, so all the students we work with, this is up to 16, are on roll at a school, and we have an individual placement agreement. It's called an IPA for each of those young people, and the school have to tell us what they're doing for the other amount of time, so that if I do get that call, if I do get someone turn up, I'm able to demonstrate by the right, this student is here for 2 days a week with us, and we have stuck now to no more than 2 days a week for people under 16, to avoid that confusion. And I can and the rest of the time they are either back in school or they're doing something else, but they are the responsibility of the school. That we're not taking on the rest of those responsibilities. We are providing AP in what we do, and supporting the schools. And the complicated one we had was the transition program, where we had them for 50% of the time and Future Gateways have them the other. And so we have got a very clear service level agreement with the local authority, so that can be made clear. And that was the one where I had Ofsted there saying, if you can't provide me with evidence of this, then we'll put you under caution. Now, fortunately, I was able to get the person at AP to send an email to confirm that, but we have tightened all that up. So we have a service level agreement for that clearly states those things, and we have IPAs for all the individual people to say that what they're doing, and we keep that to, if we go with 2 days a week, we know that if they're going to be doing other things for 3 days a week, we haven't got them for more than 50% of their educational time.
Excellent.
Does that?
Yes, I think so. There's just just to answer a question from Animal Antics. So you haven't, am I right in assuming that you haven't registered with Ofsted?
We haven't registered.
Right.
We are registered with Ofsted, but for something completely different, which is short break activities with people with disabilities, and that's about respite care. So that's complete. But from education, we're not registered with Ofsted. They do know we exist. We have had a visit. We have a letter that says we've been visited, and that we are not acting as a school. We are an AP provider. But I fully understand people's concerns over that. And it was an absolutely horrible experience to have someone saying there, if you can't evidence this, I will put you under caution. So, and that is my understanding of it following that experience. So I'm fairly certain on what I'm saying. However, it could be interpreted differently by different inspectors. That's the only sort of caveat that comes with what I'm saying. But what I would say is, whatever you are doing, make sure you've got evidence, so back it up, so that you can show people registers, so that you can show them that the agreements that you've got for those individuals.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob. I mean, I think just sort of going on to that one a little bit more was a message from Jeff at Pathways. I think we're looking to start a home ed project on our site, which is aimed at picking up children and young people who are not comfortable or not being served by statutory schools. Presumably that might encounter some problems if they're not already covered.
We have looked, we did start looking at different ways, you know, about independent schools and that sort of thing, but we've steered away from it. The way we would work in this is, we have got, there are other APs in the area that are registered as schools. So if we were going to try and do that, we would look to work in partnership. So there's, for example, there's the box in Epping, or open box in Epping, so and they were like us. They got caught for things, so they had to change all the systems, so they had registered as a school. So we would look to work with them, through them, and they and then provide the bit that we do. We're not looking to try and teach people their academic stuff. Although obviously whilst they're here, they get their geography and their biology and their maths and their, you know, but they don't realise that. But we don't do their sort of education. We are an AP provider to do what we are best at. And whilst I think I saw another quick question in there which would follow on quite nicely. So therefore we are not we don't have many qualified teachers. We have people that are animal care instructors or are activity instructors or a garden specialist. However, what has really helped our programs is we do have 2 teachers on the payroll. So one of the teachers is our leads on our learning programs, and so that means we have some people on the staff that speak the school's language, so they become the liaison between the schools, and so they set things up and make sure that we have lesson plans properly and do all our verification for City and Guilds or BTEC, and give provide our staff with a remit in which to work, a direction in which to work, and that sort of thing. But not all our staff are trained teachers.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you. Sorry, Debbie, do you want me to go through some more?
Yes, do you want to keep, I'm just looking at them, if you're happy to just work through those, Rachel. Yeah,
may as well. Yes, there are a couple all about the accreditation type stuff that you do. So we've got one from Rachel Wallace asking, what process/training did you go through to become a centre that can accredit, or do you accredit through other professional bodies or exam boards? And related to that, it's another question from Sharon saying, is it quite expensive to be a registered centre for City and Guilds? And how many, we'll talk about cost effective in a minute, but it's about the accreditation for your you know, for your centre. I wonder if you can tackle that.
We are accredited with City and Guilds. However, we were quite one small organisation struggles to sometimes fulfil the number of people you need to get through. And whilst it wasn't that expensive when we did it to register, there was a reasonable amount of work involved, but once we'd done it, a lot of the things were already in place. But what they said was, if you don't spend more than £4,000 with us a year, then you'd have to pay the extra. Obviously you pay to register students, you pay for their certificates, but if that didn't amount to more than £4,000, then you'd have to pay the extra. Now, in fairness, we've never actually been charged that, but what we did is we went into partnership. So we didn't register Lambourne End with City and Guilds. We have hands-on registered with City and Guilds, and that is then a partnership between ourselves, Wellgate Community Farm, and Wellies On, which then means we have therefore the hands-on partnership accredited, but we have 3 different sites where that takes place. So that and in fairness, Wellies On haven't used that for a number of years, but that means that we've got 3 different projects that are all contributing people that might want qualification to be registered, certificates. If you have people out to do a verification visit, that all counts as the money you'd have to spend. So it was much easier to hit those targets and not incur costs. So, and all the costs were then split between all 3 projects, not just one. So that's been quite an effective way of doing it. And we put in a partnership agreement between us all. You have to have things like health and safety policies and safeguarding policies, but into that agreement we then put that we checked them, and we each had our own one within that, and then we only wrote additional policies and procedures where they were needed to be the same for our sort of teaching policies, etc. So that's worked really well for us, but I know not always easy if you're not close to people, but that has worked for us.
Are you accredited through any for anything else apart from City and Guilds?
No, I mean, we're looking at changing, but we used to be registered for Skills for Working Life, which was part of National Proficiency Test Council, but that moved under City and Guilds, and City and Guilds was the one that fitted us best at the time. It allowed us to do they did some leisure and tourism things as well, and sports and recreation, as well as land-based and the gardening and the level 1 and level 2. So that worked really well. We are currently reviewing that again, because it might not be, it has changed. Some of the courses are changing, and some of the support we've had, especially through COVID and with the changes, we haven't been overly happy with. So we are investigating what else might be out there, or what might work. But currently we are just registered with City and Guilds, so City and Guilds qualifications we offer.
Perfect, thank you. This is a question from Tim, is saying that you mentioned that Food for Thought was lottery funded in the first instance, and he wants to know, how is it funded now?
It's one of those things that really excites me when every time I go down there. We originally got 3-year funding from the lottery via their local food program. If I'm honest, when I wrote that, we wrote the big proposal, and the proposal was about the amount of local food we produce, and I dropped the second aim was to engage people in growing, whilst I knew actually the primary aim was to engage people in growing, and the local food was secondary. But that gave us 3-year funding for 2 members of staff. It also paid for things like polytunnels and a bit of work to be done, and allowed us to get the project established. And about 2 3/4 years through, it looked like it was all coming to a bit of an end, and we hadn't managed to get enough people involved. And then 2 local authorities suddenly didn't want it to close, and commissioned some places, which kept it going. And now we're about it's pretty much 10 years on. When personal budgets came in, it's funded by people's personal budgets. It's funded by schools paying directly. So schools paying directly for groups or individuals, or through people's personal budgets. But that's where I go back to saying about the thresholds. To get a personal budget, you have to have quite a high threshold of need. So we do get people that have quite a significant level of need, quite often requiring one-to-ones to come with them as well. And one of the things that's concerned us is there's still quite a lot of people we know that fall between the cracks because their threshold of need isn't quite high enough. They either don't get personal budgets, schools won't pay for them, and yet they know they want to be at the centre, and this. So we are currently trying to fundraise from trusts, etc., so that we have a pot of money there that we can support people as well. But Food for Thought at the moment is self-financing based on personal budgets and direct payments from schools.
Cool, brilliant, thank you, Rob. And then we've got another question. How long is the lead up to the goat show that you mentioned? Is it done over a few weeks, or is it a day task?
No, obviously these things can vary. So in rural studies, because they're coming 1 or 2 days a week, or a transition, they could have a goat that they're going to be responsible for keeping clean over the few weeks. But we do also do it as an hour and a half activity. We do it for groups when they come to visit, where they choose ear tag numbers out of a hat. They get that goat. They tie them up. They all have a go at grooming them, and then we just go outside and we go from being friendly and showing them how to lead them and how to move them, to then getting our clipboard, putting our white coat on, and taking them into the show ring to get them to show it. So it's designed as a sort of an hour and a half activity that school groups can come in and do on a school visit, as well as but then we've adapted it as well for when we're working with on a regular basis with groups. So it's quite a good fun one, and it is, I have to be honest, it is chaos. The goats win every time.
Brilliant, thank you, Rob. We've got a just Debbie, have we got time for a couple more?
Yes, yeah, we know we're all right at the moment. Yeah, keep going. Yeah,
cool, excellent. So another question, do you support adults who can work towards the level 1 qualification? I think you might have answered this, but
there's no reason why we wouldn't. They can do the City and Guilds. And we do have some adults on our Food for Thought programme. The difficulty is where that funding comes from. So that's another reason why we're setting our Common Ground programme. If we get it up and running, will definitely, the idea of that to be cross-generational, So for people that might be feeling isolated, have retired and that sort of thing, want to feel valued, but to work alongside younger people that are looking to upskill and work together. So we do have some older people on food for thought, but the difficulty has been finding people that will fund that, and obviously we have to pay for the staff to work with those people and support them to do the work they're doing and get them through the qualification. So that's the biggest, that's what stops it. It's not that we wouldn't do it, but it's difficult for people to find funding to support it.
Fabulous. Thanks, Rob. And lastly, do you know if there's an animal care qualification of some kind for primary age children?
Oh,
It's just
no, I don't, not that I know of. Certainly the City and Guilds things you can do with you can do, they aim it at 14. We sometimes start people a bit earlier, and there's a lot of primary children that would be easily capable of that. What we've done, it because we also run young farmers clubs at weekends, and we've got project books that we do for them, and so they work through those. There's sort of 3 pages on each animal we have, and there's a sort of knowing things about the animals we've got, knowing how to do some jobs, and they sort of do the workbook. So for young farmers coming every Saturday, they do the routine stuff of feeding and watering and a bit of mucking out, and then they might have an hour and a half working on their project book, as it were. And when they complete that, they get a Lambourne End certificate. There has been in the past, before social farms and gardens came into being, Federation of City Farms Community Gardens, we had talked about having farms doing their own sorts of bronze, silver award, and then if they achieved a gold award, then Federation of City Farms Community Gardens would have done, and we started working towards that, and that might be something to work on into future. You know, if we could have if there was an award that we could do that came from social farming and gardening, that had a national recognition. It might not be a course as such, but it might just give a bit more weight to it. But I don't know of any courses directly. At that sort of age, they're normally quite happy with sort of in-house certificates and putting that sort of work together.
Rachel, there's in the chat.
Yes, I was just about to say thank you, Rob. And we've had a comment in the chat from Animal Antics saying that the AQA unit award scheme would suit primary school age, not a qualification, but an accreditation.
Thank you very much.
So brilliant, thank you.
Thank you so much for those. Hopefully, I mean, if people have got any other questions, do obviously sort of ping them over post webinar, and we can pass them on to Rob or see whether we can answer them internally. I'm just going to share my screen for one last time. And just ask Rachel, while we have a captive audience of webinar attendees, Rachel, do you just want to highlight the survey?
Yes, please. Thanks, Debbie. And sorry to, I'm not going to miss an opportunity to plug this at every single thing I'm on at the moment. So if you're a care farmer or green care provider, please fill in our care farming and green care annual survey. It's that time of year again. We really can't do what we do without you, especially this year. You know, we've all had a really challenging year, and we really need to know what's been happening in our sector. And so the more care farmers and nature-based interventions that complete this and tell us what's happening, the better, because then we can see what effect the pandemic has had on our sector. We can continue to lobby on your behalf, and the more good data we have, the easier that enables us to, well, the easier it makes that job for us. And also we're going hell for leather to highlight the role that care farming and green care can play in the nation's mental health recovery post-COVID. So if we've got your data, we can shout it from the rooftops, and that's pretty much all I'm going to say. Otherwise, brilliant. I'll bore you to tears.
Thank you. Thanks, Rachel. Yes, I mean, we'll follow us on Twitter. We'll be sort of, you know, tweeting links to this. You'll no doubt have a lot of emails from us as well if you're on our database. So yes, we are keen to get as many as possible to fill in that. So just looking at the time, I just really want to thank well, Rachel, and particularly to Rob, just so much. Rob, you know, for your expertise and your time today. I mean, I imagine it's just something that we could talk about for another hour, really, this, and I suspect there'll be more questions, and we could probably quite easily have a targeted hour on the sort of discussions around Ofsted and the sort of issues of illegal schools. I know we get a lot of inquiries about that, so it's perhaps something we can pick up in further detail. But we really hope that everybody who's attended today has found that useful. You will receive an automated email a few hours after the webinar with a link to a short feedback survey. So please, if you could complete that, it just helps us keep a track of who's accessing the resources, but it also just helps provide opportunities for us to learn from you and help us adapt our work as we move forward. And we're always interested to hear if you've got any ideas for future webinars as well. We love getting feedback and putting on sort of themes around what you're looking for. As I mentioned, this webinar has been recorded and we will be uploading it to our website. So if there is anything you missed or you want to pass it on to anybody else, it'll be there and available. And please feel free to contact us, any of the GCF team, for further information or support on this contact information that we've got here. And just lastly, please don't forget to follow the Growing Care Farming Project on Twitter. If you're on Twitter, we like Twitter. We do a lot on Twitter. So do tag us into any social media posts that you'd like us to share as well. So bang on 3 o'clock, kept to time. Thank you all so much. And I will say goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.